Hi everyone, this is Katie from Moonflower Moments. A few months ago or even a year ago, a lot of discussion was floating around YouTube about whether or not we personify our decks and whether or not essentially it was the right thing to do. And I'm here to tell you that I 1000% personify my decks. So I have some examples of how I do so with my Decks for Chords series. That is going to be a revolving series here on my YouTube channel. So far I've done the Pentacle suit with it. And so in this series in particular, I personified my decks by essentially asking myself what type of personalities different decks would have, and then matching those types of personalities to different court cards. And so I'll leave a description in the box below for you to check out if you would like. But if you like this kind of content, I think that would be a great place to go as well. So this being said, today I'm going to start a new revolving series on my channel titled Decks for Friends. And in this particular series, I'm going to act as if my decks are real people. And I'm going to come up with a list of different activities that I would do with friends in real life and tell you which decks I would match with those types of people. So the first type of activity I'd want to do in particular would be traveling. So I would want to go ahead and grab Fifth Spirit as my traveling buddy. The reason I say this is because of how incredibly diverse it is. And so in a second we're going to get some of the majors, and also the court cards very clearly depict different personality types. And I feel like if you pretended that this deck was one singular person, but yet that singular person had all of these different types of personality nuances to them, that type of person would have to be someone who is very experienced with the world. Someone who has really gone through and has seen a lot of different things in order to develop all of these different parts of themselves. And so I'd want to travel with them because, quite frankly, I think it would be fun to travel with someone who has all of that types of experiences, someone with a very well-rounded personality. I would also want to travel with someone like this because of the way that the pips are depicted. And so if I were to travel with this person and on the side of the road we happen to see a fireworks stand, they wouldn't just pass it up. They would say, hey, let's throw a fireworks party. And so the way that the pips are illustrated, even though they're very simple, you can see the potential behind what you could do with all of these items. So that is someone that you would want to travel with. Someone who doesn't just look at what's around you and says, nah, but someone who looks at what's around you and decides, let's play. And let's use these items, all of these different types of foods, instead of just having, a little bit for a snack and a little bit for a dinner. Let's sit down and have an entire feast with it. Those are the types of people that I'd want to travel with because, quite frankly, they would be the most fun. Now, the next one that I'm going to do is a friend that I would call on to help me change a tire. So this would be my zombie tarot. So in this deck, these people are fighting zombies in a zombie apocalypse. I think that changing a tire, while it's a very basic skill, is, it's a type of skill. It's a type of survival skill in a certain situation because you need to know how to change a tire in case you're stuck in a situation where you have no transportation. Maybe you're on a bad street, somewhere you really don't want to be at night. You need that type of survival skill. And it's clear that the people that are in this deck, such as, this is a great example of it, the Three of Hazards. This person has trained this zombie essentially to act as a dog. And so he has the mental fortitude to go through difficult things. Sometimes changing a tire can be incredibly difficult, especially if you're in like a rough area or if you're on the side of the road and there's a lot of cars that are passing you by. This man, he made the most out of a difficult situation. He also clearly was able to keep his wits. And so I feel for that reason the zombie tarot would be the one that I fell on for, or called on to help me change my tire. Very clearly, this person knows how to survive situations. Now, the next one that I'm going to describe is less about the content of the deck and more about the way that I use it. So For my friend I call on to go to the gym, that would be my Crow Tarot. So I very rarely read with a Crow Tarot, though every time I do read with it, I find that it is a very straightforward reader. The crows like to give advice. They like to tell you straight up what's going on. And so I have a good relationship with the crows. But the primary reason that purpose behind me using this deck is I use it as altar cards. And so if there's a particular type of energy that I'm trying to manifest, a particular type of goal that I'm trying to meet, I display these cards as altar cards for however long I feel like I need them. And so I think that the crows, I would want them to go to the gym with me because, like I already said before, they're very straightforward. They would give me advice on how to lift weights to gain bulk or maybe to lose weight or anything like that. Very straightforward. They would tell you as it is. But they would also hold me accountable to my goals. And so that reason, the Crow Tarot, he would be my gym buddy. I mean, look how cute he is, too. I think the crows in this deck are so emotive. So the next one would be, who would I call on to host a dinner party? So I'm the kind of person, I have a stellium in my 9th house, which is ruled by Taurus. And so I'm someone who is very adventurous. I'm someone who, especially as a Cancer, who is very house-driven, but I'm very adventurous within that house. So one of the ways that this personality type, like for myself, shows up in my life is that I try different recipes all the time. I very rarely cook like the same thing like 3 times a year. And so I'm very familiar with different types of cuisines. And so if I'm trying to host a dinner party, I want the Goddess Tarot because of the way that it depicts the people in this deck. So the minors are associated with a particular culture, and each set of minors has a different culture depicted. I'm not even going to try to guess what they are because I wouldn't want to misrepresent it. But then the majors are also from all over the world as well. And so I think that this is the type of dinner party where we're going to have world cuisine. Everybody's going to have a little something that keeps them feeling full and satisfied. I think also because this palette is so soft, and in my experience, the Goddess Tarot tends to be a gentle reader, I would want her as my my dinner party friend, because she would want to make everyone in the room feel very comforted. So I did a reading with this deck this week, and I got the 10 of Staves, and instead of the 10 of Wands typically being depicted as, you know, burnout or carrying too many burdens, essentially the guidebook focused on this deck with the sun rising above the horizon and knowing that all of the hard work has paid off. You want to feel that way when you're at a dinner party. You want to be able to laugh, you want to be able to breathe, and I think this deck allows a lot of space for that because of how comforting it is. So Goddess Tarot, she would be my dinner party gal, and we would have a great time cooking and entertaining and hosting together. Now this one is the Mystical Dreams Tarot, which if you've seen any of my videos, you've definitely seen this deck. I thought to myself, what if I wanted a friend to join a coven with? And my mind instantly went to Mystical Dreams. I mean, it's in the name itself, it's mystical. It definitely represents a dreamscape. From my understanding, all of these images came from the creator's dreams, which is why some of them don't match up with traditional RWS, because she really wanted to communicate the dreams that she was having, the prophecies she was experiencing with the rest of the world, and she thought that tarot would be a unique system to do that with. And so I think because of its close association with dreams, with magic, with the intuition, with how watery it is, this is the type of friend that I would want to join a coven with me, because I would get to experience things that are not in this world. I would get to experience things that are just very surreal. Now the next prompt is a deck that I would like to write poetry with, and so for that reason I would have to choose the William Blake Tarot. So the William Blake Tarot is based off of the artwork and the poetry from William Blake himself. He was a poet. And so I know that seems like an obvious answer, but part of the reason that I'm so enamored by this deck and by William Blake himself is because of how raw this deck is. I think that it does a beautiful job depicting all aspects of life, both the inspiration, the creativity, and then also the true despair of what life can bring. I think all of the colors in here are fabulous because of the ways that they depict these different emotional states. And I'm with someone, when I write poetry, I write primarily memoirs. And I write very reflective poetry that's based off of my life experiences. And typically those are centered around deep emotional experiences that I've had, that there's juxtaposition in those experiences. It's not just a sad moment, but it's a sad and joyous moment. It's a moment filled with agony and also with bliss. And so I would want to write with William Blake because I think that the William Blake the person and also William Blake the deck is someone who understands the juxtaposition and the nuances of life. So I have another deck for this prompt too, especially because I enjoy writing poetry. And that would be the Tarot Vampires. I like the Tarot Vampires for writing poetry because, as cliche as it sounds, this deck is definitely one that represents the darker aspects of life. And since I'm someone who gets a lot of emotional purging from writing, I like how many snakes are depicted in this deck in an esoteric sense of transformation, of purging. I think that this deck, if it was a friend of yours, it would be willing to sit in the darkness with you. You could tell it all kinds of shit and it would just nod its head and say, me too. Or it would just make space for you in the silence. I think that it's also incredibly sensual. You can see that especially with the cup suits, that there's a lot of like beautiful sensual imagery that is depicted, or even here with the Daughter of Scepters, which is wands. And so I think that in order to be a good poet, at least this is my standards, you have to be willing to open your senses to the world around you. And I think this deck is one that is already expert at that. So those would be my two decks to write poetry with. And that's really interesting because essentially everybody, depending on how you write poetry, is going to have a different answer for that. Now, the next deck that I would use would be Slavic Legends. And I would use Slavic Legends to forage. So this deck is super slippery, so I'm going to just hold it in my hand as I go. So I think that this is the luscious deck that I own. For that reason, I named it my Queen of Pentacles deck in my Decks for Court series, which I'll already have tagged below. It's incredibly lush, and I think that the foliage especially is so beautiful. So someone who is like this deck would know that these aren't just ferns, but you know, ferns that maybe perhaps you could dig up the roots and you could nibble on the roots. They would see this flower as not just a flower that's spreading these seed pods, but a flower that maybe is representative of like a piece of garlic, since this is typically what garlic looks like. They would know how to work the beauty of the world. They would understand the majesty and the heart that goes into foraging. You know, it's not just something that's you do for out of a sense of wanting to learn a survival skill, but it's something that you learn out of deep appreciation for the world. It's something that you understand as a deep link between you and the natural world. And so I think for those reasons, that would have to be my foraging deck, the Slavic Legends. So this one's another one, another friend that I would call on. This is the Botticelli. I would call on this friend to go antique shopping. And like right now I am desperate to find someone who's willing to antique shop with me. I love antique shopping. I absolutely do. I love going to flea markets. I love going to antique shops. I love poking around and going to estate sales. And I feel like Botticelli would very much do this with me. So Botticelli, based off of the gold foiling, they know their worth. And they also know how to find things that are of worth. And even things that are desolate, say for example with this Five of Pentacles, you can see that there's still foiling here. There's still flowers in the background. And so I think that they would be able to take a piece of furniture or a piece of artwork that is really run down and make something beautiful out of it based off of the potential that they see. I think that this overall look really fits that well. And so Botticelli would absolutely be my antique shopping friend. I have two more. So the next friend that I would call on is Goblin Market, and this would be to have a game night. So Goblin Market and I have a very tricky relationship. I've tried to give this deck away. No, I really have tried to give this deck away multiple times. But for some reason, it stays lodged in my brain. I don't know why, it just does. These are some tricky little shits. They are goblins, they are fairies, they're whatever you want to call them. It's based off of the famous poem, The Goblin Market. And I feel like these would be the greatest friends to have a board game with, because I feel like they would be so cunning. So yes, they might cheat a little bit, but that would force you to be more cunning in the background, constantly weighing the odds, constantly trying to outwit them, trying to catch on to their schemes. And so it would definitely be a more mentally stimulating type of game night. And I definitely probably wouldn't give them like the key to my safe, but we would have a good time. So this is the Goblin Market. And then my last prompt would be, what kind of friend would I call on to have a spa day? I have 2 decks for this one. I'm gonna start with the one that's a little bit more difficult for me to describe. So I feel like a spa day is all about knowing your body, relaxing into your body, and having a fresh sense of renewal. And so I would have to pick Southern Botanic for that spa day friend. So I do have the Poisons Pact mix in. I definitely think that that changes the attitude of it. So let's just focus mostly on like these ones that have numbers on it. I think that those would be the true spa friends. So the reason that I would use this for a spa is because of how clean the imagery is. So you can see that because of the way that this imagery has been designed, there's lots of smooth textures. The cardstock itself is very smooth. And so it reminds me of after you've just gotten exfoliated and your skin is just healthy and your skin is just bright. This smooth, nice texture. Because it's plants, because it's mostly like Pentacles energy, it reminds me of the body. It reminds me of coming back to simple natures and just enjoying the present moment and what you have. And I mean, it doesn't matter what circumstance you're in, you always have your body, and so you always have room to enjoy it. So I think that that's why this would be my spa day friend. She would definitely know the opportunities of when she needs to be quiet and like just enjoy the moment, which I think is important too if you want to have a relaxing day. And then the other one I'm going to throw in, I'm not sure if I've ever shown this deck on my channel, would be Tarot of Light. So she's very smooth too. So like I had mentioned before, the exfoliated texture of the skin, I think that definitely works with this. It seems like we've been exfoliated, we've been moisturized, we've done what we need to do. So I think that this would be one of my spa day decks because of how comforting it is. So it feels as if you have just climbed into a warm bath. It feels like rest. This is a great card to demonstrate it. That rest is like overcoming you and overcoming your body. I think it's a great deck for coming back to yourself, especially the guidebook. The guidebook is not one that's pokey at all. It's incredibly supportive. Some might say that it's too supportive because it's definitely not one that's been meant to poke at you in any way. A lot of the cards that are traditionally seen as negative have a positive spin, but I think that that works for a spa day. When you're trying to relax, when you're trying to get back in tune with your own body and your own sense of self, I think that keywords such as surrender for 10 of Angels just happen to make sense. Like 9 of Angels, guardian, that makes sense. This is the type of friend that I would want to have with me at the spa day because they're not bombarding me with stress. They're enjoying the moment and they're trying to essentially find their bliss. So those were the last ones. There were a few more prompts that I had discovered, so there might be a part 2 of this series. It won't be immediate, but it's something that I'm going to keep in my back pocket because I think this is one that is limitless. One of my favorite things about having a YouTube channel is all of the opportunities it gives me to view my decks from different lenses. And so I think that now that I've made this video, it's going to be very difficult for me to avoid looking at the Tarot of Light, but anything but like my spa day friend. And that could actually really benefit my practice because, like I'd mentioned before, I used this deck when I read for the water oak, which I'll have another tree video coming up at the end of this month. But other than that, it's not something I've used in a while. But now that I see it as someone who is comforting, someone who is able to help me find my bliss, I might reach for this deck more in those particular situations. And so I think that's why it's important to personify your decks. It gives you the opportunity to play, to know them more, to understand your collection from a deeper lens, and just helps you to value it more. So once again, this was Moonflower Moments. If you like seeing this kind of content, please subscribe. And I wanted to go ahead and give a thank you to everybody who likes and who comments and who shares. I really appreciate being in this space. And so I definitely intend to make more content like this. So y'all have a great day. And if you want to play along, feel free to use the hashtag that I've labeled this video. Thank you.